Hey guys, we're going to run through a little bit of chapter 13 today and get us ready to get into the 20th century as we approach the last couple days of the trimester. So we'll jump right into it. Who are we talking about right now? Pope St. Pius X. Whoops. Let's highlight him, not cross him out. Good. Pope St. Pius X. Now, everybody always says there's a million Pope Piuses to learn in this course, and there's not a million. There's like four that we talk about: Pius X, Pius IX, Pius XI. They take the same name in order, and that's what throws everybody off. But Pius X, we remember him. Who was he? From a young age, he wanted to be a priest. He rises up through the ranks very, very quickly. He was made a spiritual director and a chancellor of the diocese, which is a high position in his own diocese. He then is made a cardinal and reforms his diocese. As Pope, what do we have on him? I'll just hit the most important things. He wanted to remain very simple. He refused many luxuries popes were used to. This is very similar to Pope Francis today. Popes, we know, were treated like kings, and we're now in a new time when people are rejecting the church and criticizing the church for using power and abusing power. Pius X thinks that is valid in many cases. So what is he going to do? He's going to live a life very simply as Pope, which in the past had been treated like a monarch. Now he's going to be more like a priest. He wore a simple cross, not made of gold. Pope Francis continues that tradition today. He has an iron cross, which is very inexpensive, not a gold one that he wears. He said, "I was born poor, I've lived poor, I wish to die poor." He reinforces the need for education. He established religious education programs in every parish. He publishes a new catechism. We know what a catechism is. He issues us a new one, a new version of it, an updated one. And he preached a homily at every Sunday Mass, which is not something popes usually did. He also encouraged the faithful to use their personal missals to bring to Mass, because what was Mass in at this time? Mass was in Latin, and you would have a missal with all the words in Mass, and you'd bring it with you. And if you opened it up, on one side, you would have the Latin, and on the other side, you'd have the English, and it would show you also what was happening during the Mass, so you could follow along. You see the priest do the first thing, the second thing, in English he's doing this thing, he's doing that thing, and he encourages, says, you're going to come to Mass, we'll pray together. It's not just going to be in Latin and you sit there and do nothing. Follow along and know what's going on in the church. He was incredibly devoted to the Eucharist, and we see this in him lowering the age of First Holy Communion to 7 years old. You used to receive your sacraments in a different order. You used to receive baptism, then you were confirmed as a child, and then you received your First Holy Communion after you learned more about your faith, and that happened around your teenage years. So what ends up happening is Pius X lowers the age of Holy Communion, puts it at a younger age. Baptism is still first. And what people tended to do was, all right, well, if we're going to have communion when we're young, we're going to move confirmation when we're older. And they kind of flip-flopped. But there's no actual official time of when you can be confirmed. Some of you were confirmed in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. I was 7th grade. I know I have friends I met when I went to college that in their diocese, you didn't get confirmed until you were 18 years old. So people still went to religious education until they were 18. It's up to the bishop of whatever diocese you're in. In our diocese, I think they moved it all to 8th grade-ish. Some are 9th grade. I think my parents were 6th grade. It's not one of those things. But the important thing that we're talking about is Holy Communion. Pius lowers this to a younger age so that way children have the benefits of the sacrament. He basically thinks if you're old enough to know right from wrong, you're old enough to be able to know this is Jesus Christ present in the Eucharist. Pope Pius X opposes modernism. There's another ism up here. What is modernism? He calls it the synthesis of all heresies. It's a form of relativism. Relativism means that there can be no truth. Anything's true. Anybody wants to believe anything, it's fine. If you think it's true, it's true. If I think something else is true, I can be right too. Everything's relative to whoever is thinking of it. Modernism is this idea that we have to change everything because we are now modern people. We have to throw aside all things because they're old, and things like the Bible, we don't need it anymore. Just throw it all away. I know these all sound like they're the same thing over and over again. but they're a little different each time. Modernism is something that we see around us today. The need to push forward and to forget our past. And we know that if we don't know the mistakes of the past, we're destined to repeat them. He was canonized. He predicted the Great War before his death. We know the Great War was World War I. They called it the Great War. He saw what was going on in the European landscape, and he predicted something bad is on the horizon. He was 100% right. Section 2, St. Francis Xavier Cabrini. Francis with an E is a female spelling. She was Italian-born. She wanted to become a missionary to China. She took a job in an orphanage and lived a personal life according to the rules of that life. She became a member of the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and established orphanages throughout Italy. She still dreamed to be a missionary to go to China. She was denied when she had requested it. She asked Pope Leo XIII if she could go to China. Leo asked Mother Cabrini instead to go to the U.S. and help the Italian Americans who are in need of support for their faith. This is the time period where so many of our ancestors have come over to the U.S. from Europe, if you're of European descent. And Pope Leo XIII knew a lot of Italians were settling in the New York area and needed people to help organize them and help them and be their support if they, faced hardships and troubles, which we know many did when they came over to this country. So she opens up an orphanage in New York. She eventually moves to the slums of Manhattan, where the immigrants were moving in. She started catechism classes for Catholic immigrants. She started with Italians and then spread to other ethnic groups. She founded hospitals in New York, now known as Cabrini Medical Center. You might hear it in the news these days. She established 67 institutions to help Italian Americans. She was a pioneer and an amazing woman in our country, in our church. She's the first canonized U.S. citizen. Where is she today? It's in Upper Manhattan. If you go to, it's north of Harlem. It's right by the Cloisters, which is a museum on the absolute extreme northern part of Manhattan. There's a church there, and it's called the Cabrini Shrine. You can go visit her body. She's incorrupt. You can see a picture of it in the iBook. Next, we have Pope Benedict XV. He was a pope at the start of World War I. He called World War I the suicide of civilized Europe and a useless massacre. He tried to maintain peace, but no one would listen. Everybody was so empowered with their own greatness, this extreme nationalism. There could never be peace if our enemy existed. And Benedict XV saw this as really a crisis. He outlined a peace plan, a 7-point peace plan that would kind of help solve the crisis in Europe. It was rejected at first, and then lo and behold, when the UN is established afterwards, or the League of Nations was first, right? The League of Nations adopts the 14-point plan of Woodrow Wilson, and he basically took the 7-point plan from Benedict XV and added his own things, and that's where that came from. He warned against the harsh treatment of Germany following World War I. If we know our history, we know that after World War I, the Germans were punished greatly, and their economy suffered. They didn't rebuild very fast, and this led to an angry young man rallying the country behind him and leading it as Adolf Hitler for World War II. So he warns against this. He predicted that this would lead to future wars to treat Germany so harshly. He emptied the Vatican treasury to aid victims of World War I, and he was relatively young when he died, 67 years old. So when you think of Benedict XV, think of World War I. Next, we have section 4, and here we are talking about an amazing occurrence that happened in Portugal. We've talked about Marian apparitions in the past. We talked about Our Lady of Lourdes. We talked about St. Catherine Labouré. There's another event happens here. This time in 1917, Mary appears to 3 shepherd children in Fatima, Portugal. She asked them to return on the 13th of each month for 6 months, May through October. She asked the children to pray rosary every day for the end of World War I. Our Lady gave the children 3 secrets. The first was a vision of hell. She asked the children to pray the rosary for the sinners in the world that they don't end up there. The second secret was that World War I was about to end. She warned that if they do not stop offending God, another worse war would begin, and predicted that Russia there was a plot to destroy peace by wars and revolutions, and this is right before the communist revolution begins. The third secret was the secret of the assassination of Pope John Paul II. The children write, a bishop dressed in white would be shot by bullets and arrows and fall as though dead. On May 13th, 1981, John Paul II was shot and survived, fulfilling this secret or this promise. It was known only to the Pope, these secrets. The children were allowed to tell the Holy Father, and the Holy Father kept those secrets, and as they came to come true, then they would say, oh, this was one of those 3 secrets. So those are the 3 secrets that Our Lady of Fatima, gave to those children that day. What was going on there as well? Portuguese authorities did not like this. Similar to Our Lady of Lourdes, they think religious devotion is craziness. They don't want it to gain any support. They believe that it's a hoax for the church to gain sympathy. Thousands began to gather on the 13th of each month when Mary would appear back to these children. And then on the last day of the 6 months, the miracle of the sun occurs. October 13th, 70,000 people gathered in the rain. The children arrived at noon. They asked the lady her name. She said, I am the Lady of the Rosary. And then she pointed to the sun, and the sun began to dance in the sky. It gave off different colors. It moved from side to side. It seemed to be falling to earth at some point. People thought it was the end of the world. There were 70,000 people standing there in the rain. In the iBook, it shows photos from that day. People that were out there, umbrellas, kneeling in the mud. After this event, people who were blind could see, the deaf could hear, the lame could walk. Even though it had been raining for days, the ground was completely dry. This was in newspapers. This was in the media. It had so many thousands of witnesses. It was almost instant. The church adopted this as legitimate and said there was a true apparition there. 1 month later, the Russian Revolution begins. World War II begins. And those predictions came true. Section 5, Pope Pius XI. Europe was recovering for World War I. He's between the world wars. Quadragesimo Anno. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. This is another social encyclical written in the 40th year since Rerum Novarum. So Rerum Novarum was Leo the 13th. And he writes Quadragesimo Anno, which means the 40th year, 40 years after Leo the 13th's Rerum Novarum. What does he do in this? He updates Leo's teachings, updates them to what's going on now because these isms have evolved: socialism, Marxism, extreme capitalism. He warns that wealth is not the most important thing. He condemned totalitarianism. He said the tragedy of modern times is breaking up society into social classes. So he is putting forth more on that social commentary, putting more on that social critique of society with his Quadragesimo Anno. And he is the Pope that signs the Lateran Treaty in 1928. Vatican City, the only piece left of the former papal states, is in an agreement with Italy to recognize its existence. We'll talk more about the Lateran Treaty when we get to a different part of this section. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much. And I'll be around for questions afterwards. Hope everybody's well.